So you're 58 and you've got about $750,000 saved for retirement. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you're asking the question almost everyone in your shoes eventually ask. Can I actually do this? Not in 10 years, not whenever some calculator finally gives you permission, but now. I constantly get asked this. And what I find is that most people who ask it have already decided the answer is no before they even finish the sentence. They've read the articles telling them they need $2 million, or they've seen the headlines about how nobody has anywhere near enough. And they've been feeling that they're behind, even though they've been doing everything right for decades. So today, we're going to take that exact situation and pull it apart piece by piece. We're going to look at a real case of someone who's 58 with $750,000, and I'll walk you through the specific decisions that actually determines whether retirement works. By the time we're done, you'll know exactly what to look at in your own numbers. And you might find out you're a lot closer to retiring than every article on the internet has told you. My name's Daniel Miller, and I help families steward their wealth with purpose and generosity. I've spent the last 12 plus years doing exactly that, sitting across the table from families wrestling with this question. Let me introduce you to one of my clients. We'll call him Tom. Tom's 58. He's been in the same field for about 25 years, and he's good at what he does. But he's tired, and lately he can't stop wondering whether the money he's saved is actually enough to walk away. Here's his financial picture. His total retirement savings sits around $750,000. About $575,000 is sitting in a traditional 401k through his employer. Another $100,000 is in a Roth IRA he's funded for years, and there's $75,000 in a regular brokerage account. He also owns his home outright, which is worth around $375,000, and he's got $35,000 in cash. When you add it all up, Tom's net worth lands just north of $1.1 million. But here's the number that actually matters for retirement. The liquid, investable money he can draw from is that $750,000. The house isn't going to pay his bills. So right now he's making about $120,000 a year and putting 12% of that into his 401k with a 3% 401k match. His monthly spending runs about $4,500, and that doesn't include healthcare because his employer is covering that for now. We'll come back to that one because it's bigger than most people realize. Tom's goal is pretty simple. He wants to be done by the end of this year. He's turning 59 early next year, and he's asking the same question I hear from almost everyone in his position. Do I actually have enough? Now, your numbers probably don't look exactly like Tom's. Maybe you've saved more, maybe less. Maybe you're married, maybe you're not. Maybe you're 55 or 63. And that's fine. The specific numbers change from person to person, but the way we evaluate whether a retirement actually works doesn't. That part is the same no matter where you're at. So before we touch a single thing, let's see where Tom actually stands today. Tom wants to retire at 58. His plan is to take Social Security as soon as he's allowed at age 62. At his full retirement age of 67, his benefit would land around $2,500 a month. Taking it early at 62 drops that to roughly $1,750. His portfolio is sitting in the classic 60-40 split, with 60% being stocks and 40% bonds, because somewhere along the way, somebody told him that's what you're supposed to do as you get closer to retirement. And his spending target is $4,500 a month. Here's where it gets tight. If Tom retires at 58, there's a 3.5-year gap before Social Security even starts. And during that whole stretch, every dollar that he spends has to come out of his own portfolio. At $4,500 a month, that's $54,000 a year, which means he's pulling close to $190,000 out of savings before a single Social Security check shows up. And we haven't even gotten to healthcare yet. Then when Social Security kicks in at 62, that reduced $1,750 a month only covers part of his spending. The remaining $2,750 every month still has to come from his portfolio indefinitely. And that's another $33,000 a year coming out of savings for the rest of his life. Based on reasonable assumptions and historical data, a plan like this isn't a disaster, but it's not exactly comfortable either. There's enough uncertainty baked into this baseline that if I'm being honest, Tom should feel a little nervous about pulling the trigger as is. And here's the part I want you to notice. Tom hasn't actually made a single intentional decision yet. He's running on defaults. The default Social Security age, default portfolio mix, and the default withdrawal plan. After doing this for over 12 years, I can tell you the defaults or the rules of thumb are almost never the best option. They're just the easiest ones. So let's start changing things and see what happens. By the way, if you're watching this and running your own numbers in your head right now, this is the exact kind of analysis we walk people through every day. There's a link in the description where you can book a conversation with my team. There's no pressure. It's just a real look at where you actually stand. The first thing I'd look at with Tom, and honestly the first thing I look at with every client, is Social Security timing, because it's the single decision that changes the most in a retirement plan. Tom's plan is to take Social Security at 62. Oftentimes, I'll hear people say things like, I want to get my money while I can get it. And I understand the instinct. It can feel safer to start collecting early, like you're locking in something before it disappears. But let's look at what that instinct actually costs. At 62, Tom's monthly check is roughly $1,750. If he waits until his full retirement age of 67, that jumps to about $2,500. That's an extra $750 every single month for the rest of his life. If he waits until 70, he's looking at roughly $3,100 a month, almost double what he'd get at 62. Now, obviously, if he waits, he's giving up years of payments. So the real question is, how long until the bigger check makes up for the years that he didn't collect? For Tom, the break even between taking it at 62 versus 67 lands around age 77. If he lives past age 77, which statistically he very likely will, waiting wins. And every year after that, it wins by more. By 85, the gap between taking it at 62 versus 67 could be well over $100,000 in additional lifetime income. And that's not a one-time number. That's income showing up every month, adjusted for inflation, for as long as he's alive. If Tom delays to 67, that's 9 years, not 3.5, where every dollar of his living expenses comes straight out of his portfolio. At $4,500 a month, that's $54,000 a year for 9 years. And that's a significant number. So why does it still make sense? Because Tom isn't losing that money, he's trading it. He's spending down some of his savings early in exchange for locking in a much bigger and guaranteed paycheck that never runs out. Once that $2,500 a month starts, it covers more of his spending, which means he's pulling less from his portfolio every month after that, which means the money he has left gets more time to grow. In my experience, for most people in Tom's situation, that trade is worth making. Now, I want to make it clear that these numbers are approximate, and everyone's Social Security situation depends on their own earnings history and birth year, but this principle holds up regardless of your numbers. Every year you delay, your guaranteed income goes up, and that changes the math on everything else in your plan. But Social Security timing is just one lever. The next thing I'd look at is how Tom's actual money is invested, because the mix he's in right now might not be doing him any favors. Tom's sitting in a 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. If you ask him why, he'll tell you what almost everyone tells me. That's what you're supposed to do when you're close to retirement. And I understand. That's been the conventional wisdom for decades. As you get closer to retirement, you get more conservative in your portfolio. But here's what most people never stop to think about. Tom's 58. If he's healthy and lives late into his 80s or even 90s, his retirement could stretch for 30 years or more. And that's not a short runway. That's an entire second career's worth of time. And when your money has to last 30 years, the scariest thing isn't a bad year in the market. It's your money failing to outpace inflation over 3 decades. If Tom stays in that 60-40 mix the whole time, historically, that's a more moderate growth path. If he shifts to a 70% stocks, 30% bonds, or even an 80-20, with more stocks and fewer bonds, the historical growth potential increases. Now, along with it, so does the volatility, and that's what actually scares people. Nobody wants to retire on a Friday and watch the market drop 20% the following Monday. So that fear is real, and it deserves a real answer, not just a don't worry about it. So here's how I think about it. Tom doesn't need all $750,000 invested aggressively. He needs the next 2 to 3 years of living expenses sitting somewhere stable and accessible. So call it $100,000 to $150,000 in cash or conservative holdings. Now the rest of his money can afford to pursue growth because he's not touching it anytime soon. He lives off the stable piece while the growth piece rides out whatever the market throws at it. And that allocation, something secure and stable for the near term and growth for the long term, is what lets someone like Tom run more aggressively overall without losing sleep over it. Because he knows the next 12 to 36 months of income that he needs is going to come in regardless of what the market does, and that's all he has to think about. Now, I want to be very clear here. A more aggressive mix means bigger swings in both directions. And past performance does not tell us what the market does tomorrow, and every situation is different. But the principle still stands. A 30-year retirement isn't automatically a reason to play it safe with everything. It might actually be the reason your money needs room to grow. There's also a cost that Tom hasn't planned for yet, and it's a very big one. Lever number 3 is healthcare before Medicare. This is the one area that blindsides almost every early retiree. Tom is 58, and Medicare doesn't start until 65. That's a 7-year gap where Tom is fully on his own for healthcare. Right now, his employer covers it, so he barely thinks about it. The day he retires, that coverage disappears, and suddenly healthcare becomes one of the biggest line items in his entire budget. Most early retirees end up on the ACA marketplace, and here's where it gets interesting. Your premium is tied to your income. So if Tom can keep his taxable income under certain thresholds, he can qualify for significant subsidies on his premium. We're talking about the difference between paying $1,500 a month for coverage and paying $400 a month. Now, if you stretch that across 7 years until he's Medicare eligible, the gap is worth more than $90,000. So how does Tom keep his income low enough to qualify? This is where his withdrawal strategy stops being a side detail and becomes the whole game. If he pulls money from his traditional 401k, every dollar counts as taxable income. If he pulls too much and his income climbs, his subsidies shrink and his healthcare costs jump right back up. If he pulls from his Roth IRA or his brokerage account instead, those dollars either don't count as income at all or they get taxed very differently. So the order Tom pulls money from isn't just a tax decision, it's a healthcare cost decision. For someone retiring before 65, it might be one of the biggest decisions in the entire plan. And it's the one almost nobody talks about because it means looking at taxes, healthcare, and withdrawals as one connected system instead of 3 separate problems. I want to be honest, ACA rules and subsidies and income thresholds will shift over time, and your situation won't look exactly like Tom's. But the principle stands. If you're retiring before 65, how you take money out of your accounts directly changes what you pay for healthcare. That's not something you want to discover by accident. And that withdrawal order doesn't just affect healthcare, it follows you straight into how much you pay in taxes for the rest of your retirement. Lever number 4, a tax-smart withdrawal strategy. Tom's working with 3 buckets of money. His traditional 401k, where every dollar he pulls counts as taxable income. His Roth IRA, which comes out completely tax-free because he's already paid taxes going in. And his brokerage account, which gets taxed depending on what he sells and how long he's held it. Most people just pull from whatever account feels obvious, which is usually the biggest one. For Tom, that's the 401k. But if he pulls $54,000 a year out of that account to cover his living expenses, every bit of it counts as income, which can push him into a higher tax bracket than he actually needs to be in. It can also shrink the ACA subsidies we just talked about. It can even affect how much of his future Social Security ends up taxable. One withdrawal decision quietly touches 3 or 4 other parts of his financial life at once. Now here's where it gets interesting. The stretch between Tom's retirement at 58 and Social Security kicking in is potentially some of the lowest income years of his entire life. There's no salary, no Social Security, just whatever he chooses to pull. And that's an opportunity most people walk right past. During that window, Tom could convert some of his traditional 401k into his Roth IRA, and he'd pay tax on the conversion, but at a much lower rate than he would later once Social Security, required distributions, and everything starts stacking on top of each other. Every dollar he converts now grows tax-free forever and comes out tax-free whenever he needs it. It also won't count toward future required distributions, it won't make more of his Social Security taxable, and it won't push his Medicare premiums up later. This early retirement window is one of the most valuable tax planning opportunities that exist, and most people miss it completely, simply because no one ever points it out to them. I'm not a CPA, and your situation isn't Tom's. You should talk to a qualified tax professional before making any Roth conversion decisions. But the concept is worth understanding on its own. The order you pull money from, and whether you use these low-income years to convert, can change your lifetime tax bill by tens of thousands of dollars. And that's a significant lever. Now, the last thing I want to look at with Tom is one of the simplest and most misunderstood pieces of the entire plan: how much he's actually going to spend. Lever number 5, your spending won't be a straight line. Most retirement plans are built on one assumption: you'll spend the exact same amount every year, adjusted for inflation, for the rest of your life. So if Tom spends $4,500 a month today, the plan just assumes $4,500 next year, plus a bit more, and the year after that, plus a bit more again, for 30 years. But that's not how it actually plays out. After years of working with clients in their late 70s, their 80s, and even their 90s, I can tell you that spending almost never follows a straight line. It generally follows a curve. The first 10 to 15 years of retirement tend to be the highest spending years. That's when people travel, renovate the house, stay active and social, and finally do everything they put off during their careers. I call those the go-go years. Then there's a stretch in the middle where spending naturally drops off. Trips get shorter or less frequent, the pace slows down, the drive to go and do starts to fade a little. And those are the slow-go years. And later in life, spending can climb again, but this time it's for healthcare, long-term care, and the costs that tend to show up as people age. Higher earlier, lower in the middle, potentially higher again at the end. That's the actual pattern. So when you build a plan around that curve instead of a straight inflation-adjusted line, the numbers shift meaningfully. Tom isn't pulling $4,500 a month plus inflation every single year for 3 decades. He's pulling more while he's active and pulling less once life naturally slows down. That difference alone can stretch a plan's sustainability by years. Now, I want to be honest about something. Nobody can predict exactly what they'll spend at 82. Life throws curveballs, healthcare costs are unpredictable, and plenty of people stay active well into their 80s. But the pattern is consistent enough across the families I've worked with that it's worth planning around. For Tom, just acknowledging that his spending won't be a straight line takes a plan that felt tight and gives it real breathing room. So after all of that, Social Security timing, the investment mix, healthcare, tax-smart withdrawals, and realistic spending, where does Tom actually land? Let's go back to where Tom started. 58 years old, $750,000 saved, planning to retire immediately, take Social Security at 62, stay in a 60-40 portfolio, spend $4,500 a month, and hope it all works out. That plan was tight. Not much room for anything to go sideways. Now look at where he lands after pulling these 5 levers. He pushes Social Security from 62 to 67, locking in a bigger guaranteed paycheck for life. He shifts his investment mix to give his portfolio more long-term growth potential while keeping a cash cushion for the early years. He plans ahead for healthcare before Medicare and structures his withdrawals to potentially qualify for ACA subsidies. He uses the low-income years before Social Security to do strategic Roth conversions, which could save him real money in taxes over the rest of his life. And he builds his spending plan around how retirement actually works, more early, less in the middle, instead of assuming the same numbers forever. None of these are risky moves. None of them requires Tom to earn more or blow up his lifestyle. They're just smarter settings on decisions he was already going to make. And together, they take a plan that felt uncertain and turns it into something Tom can actually feel good about. But here's what I want to leave you with. The numbers might say Tom can do this, but But retirement is more than a spreadsheet. I've watched people retire with twice what Tom has and struggle because they had no idea what to do with their time. And I've watched people retire with less and absolutely thrive because they had a purpose, a plan for their days, and a reason to get up in the morning. So if you're standing where Tom is, yes, run the numbers. Look at your Social Security timing. Look at your allocation. Look at healthcare. Look at taxes. Look at your spending. And if you need help with any of that, reach out to us. But also ask yourself the question that doesn't show up on any spreadsheet. Do I actually know what I'm retiring to? Because the best plan in the world only works if the life on the other side is the one that you actually want to live. You owe this exercise to yourself. Take some time and put some effort into defining these things so you can enjoy a long and prosperous retirement, being personally fulfilled and financially secure. But some things do go wrong in retirement that most people never see coming, even with a plan that's solid. I actually made a video on the 7 truths retirees learn too late, the things that I keep watching families discover after it's already too late to easily fix. If you want to make sure none of those catch you off guard, that's the one to watch next. I'll see you there.